This episode may contain content of a graphic nature, including descriptions of physical and sexual violence against adults, children, and animals. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi everyone, I'm Tonya.
And I'm Talia.
And we are Crimes and Consequences, a true crime podcast. Hi Talia.
Hi, Tonya.
How you doing?
Oh, today's a great day. How are you?
Yeah, it's a great day.
Fucking great day.
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of Crimes and Consequences. And before I get into today's story, I would just like to remind everyone to hit the subscribe or follow button. So before I tell the story today, I just have to warn everyone, it's a horrible, horrible, graphic case of child abuse.
Girl, didn't we already go down this path?
Yeah, with baby lollipops we did.
Yes.
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry.
What is going on here?
I got another one, and I'm really sorry.
Man.
This one was...
I literally walked out last time depressed.
This one's bad. This one's bad, and I'm not going to give it away. But anyway, I was pissed.
Girl.
I was pissed.
Okay, I don't need all the details of this, okay?
Okay. Anyway, by just looking at her, you would think Lois Jergens was the picture-perfect housewife in the time of 1950s suburban America. At the very least, that image was exactly what she constantly strived for.
This is the I Love Lucy era.
Yes. She strived for this, and that's the expectation that she set for herself. Lois grew up in an impoverished family with 16 siblings.
Holy shit.
Right?
The Catholic?
Damn, I'm guessing. So she knew exactly what kind of life she wanted when she eventually left home. She used her marriage to former band leader turned electrician Harold Jergens as a means to improve her social standing. At least with Harold, she was considered middle class, which was far better than what she grew up in. Lois and Harold lived in White Bear Lake, Minnesota, which is a suburb of St. Paul, and Lois took pride in the home that they made together. Lois had a pathological need to control her environment. Like, she was obsessive. She cleaned, and she tended to her home, both inside and out. Like, she just wanted to have this appearance of everything's perfect. She was all about the image. Her house was spotless. Her garden was always tended to, and her life was seen as nothing short of perfectly manicured. Lois herself was prim and proper, and both her and Harold were devout Catholics and pillars of the community. You knew it. The only thing that left their perfect image tainted was the fact that Lois could not have children, and they desperately wanted kids. To add insult to injury, the couple also couldn't adopt. Since, while the authorities had barred Lois from pursuing this path to motherhood, the reason for this sanction was due to Lois's struggle with her mental health. Over the past decade, she had suffered bouts of depression and psychosis, which included an extended stay at a psychiatric institution.
Oh.
As a quote-unquote mental patient, Lois was subjected to a variety of therapy during her stay.
Oh, man, in the 50s?
Yeah, and it included electroshock therapy. She was diagnosed as having psychoneurosis, which is a functional personality disorder characterized by disturbing emotional symptoms, such as morbid fears, obsessive thoughts, or depressive states, but without delusions or hallucinations.
Okay.
Yet despite her history, as well as those who would label her as unfit to raise a child, Lois yearned for motherhood. But it wasn't so much that she felt this super strong maternal drive to procreate, but more like an obsessive compulsion that had everything to do with the image she wanted to put out in the world. After all, a child would complete the ideal picture that she had in her mind of, having a perfect family. Not being able to bring a child into the world drove her further into madness.
Oh, shit.
She was determined to rectify the situation, and Lois was an extremely determined woman. When she wanted something, she always got it, and she felt as though this situation would be no different. Using the official channels close to her, Lois managed to arrange for the private adoption of a baby boy named Robert. He was born on June 22nd, 1960, And 4 days later, on June 26th, he was delivered to the Jergens home. Robert was the perfect addition and fit in well at the Jergens household. It definitely helped that he learned from a young age not to get in his mother's way or cause any undue mess that would most likely send her into a fit of rage. Despite what the authorities had originally thought of Lois, she appeared to be a devout mom. Robert grew to be an intelligent, gentle, and obedient child, and his adoption with the Jergens seemed to be successful in the eyes of authorities. As time passed, Lois had managed to change their minds. Now they began to rethink.
Wait, Lois had managed to change their minds.
Yeah, remember they said that they didn't want her to adopt.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Now they began to rethink the ideas on her capabilities as a parent and reconsidered a next adoption for the Jergens.
So now she's okay to adopt because she's been doing a good job.
Right. As such, when Lois applied for adoption once again in 1962, the authorities were far more lenient this second time around. The second child to be adopted by Lois and Harold was 1-year-old toddler named Dennis. The little boy had been born to a 17-year-old teenage mom named Jerry Sherwood. At the time, Jerry was in a bit of trouble, and when she gave birth to Dennis, she was still residing in a home for troubled girls. Because of this, she was convinced by those in charge to put her baby up for adoption.
Right.
She didn't want to give up her baby, but Jerry did as she was told. She was promised that Dennis would go to a good home that would take good care of him. Dennis spent his first year of life in the foster care of an elderly woman who had adored him with endless amounts of love and the right kind of affection. Now things would be different, as he would have a family and an older brother. What could be bad about that?
Tonya, just stop.
Right? I know.
I already know. I mean, I don't know, but...
What could go wrong?
You're going to tell me, and I'm just really, seriously not going to be able to handle this.
Fucking everything goes wrong. Almost from the moment Dennis arrived, there were problems that arose. That is, in Lois's eyes, in her eyes alone. She took an immediate dislike to the little boy, who was so different from her precious little Robert. After all, Robert had been trained, whipped into submission, and ultimately molded into Lois's perfect vision of an obedient, respectful child. She wanted the nuclear family, and she got that with Robert. Dennis, though, not so much. He was quite the opposite, which she despised. Dennis was spirited, energetic, and a rambunctious toddler.
Okay, that's normal.
Yeah, exactly. In other words, he's perfectly normal. I mean, he's a baby. Apparently, this was just too much for Lois to handle. She was used to the regimented ways of her household and the structure that came along with tidiness and obedience. In fact, she disliked Dennis so intensely that Harold actually suggested that maybe they shouldn't go through with the adoption.
Wow.
But Lois disagreed for 2 reasons. The first was she was concerned that it would discourage agencies and whatnot.
For future adoptions.
Exactly, for future adoptions. And her second reason was she decided to make Dennis her little project. She was going to make him conform.
Plus, it would look bad if she was taking in a kid and then
giving him back. Mm-hmm. Having a failed adoption. She was just going to make him into the perfect child, just like Robert. As a result, the adoption went ahead as planned, and Dennis was delivered to his new home in December 1962 when he was 14 months old. He didn't know it at the time, but he was being introduced to the family that would end up being responsible for his terrible and fateful demise. It only took a couple of months after moving into the Jergens home before Dennis had to be rushed to the hospital for first and second degree burns on his lower abdomen, genitalia, and buttocks. Even though the hospital visit was reported, Lois had somehow managed to convince the doctors that this was just an accident. She blamed the incident on Dennis. She claimed that while she was washing him in the sink, he had turned on the hot water while she left the room only momentarily. And by some fucked up miracle, they actually believed her. Really?
This is 62.
Yeah, I know. Somehow the incident was officially deemed accidental, and the world went on, per usual. This was just the beginning of what was going to be a most horrific 2.5-year descent into pure hell.
Oh my
for this toddler.
God, Tonya.
I know it's bad. Unfortunately, the process of adopting Dennis was complete, so he was the Jergens' son. Over time, Dennis went from being a free-spirited and outgoing little boy to one who was quite withdrawn and beaten down. He was frequently seen with bruises, which were the direct result of daily beatings delivered at the hands of Lois herself.
What's Harold doing during this?
Harold's doing jack shit, just to let you know. He was afraid of Lois, too.
Okay.
So, later, family members would speak to how the little boy was forced to wear sunglasses in order to hide black eyes. Imagine a 2-year-old being made to wear sunglasses.
Yeah, mine would never wear them.
Right,
or
right.
a hat.
Pull them off their face,
Yeah,
right? Robert had been taught to recite the rosary at the age of 2, and he did it with ease. But when Dennis struggled to achieve this feat, and he didn't do it so easily, he was forced to kneel on a broomstick handle for extended periods of time, leaving him in so much pain that he barely was able to stand.
How are you supposed to get a 2-year-old to do the rosary?
I know. Dude, I don't even know the rosary.
I do, but I mean, at 2?
I know.
I'm just hoping they don't poop their pants.
Right, exactly. Like, come on. Well, Robert could do it.
Okay.
In her effort to make Dennis right in her eyes, Lois embarked on a series of sadistic and corporal punishments. She never made a single excuse for her mistreatment of him. If anything, she seemed proud of it, claiming she was doing God's work and making him perfect in the eyes of the Lord. When Dennis would wet his diaper or wet his bed, Lois's remedy was to place a spring-action clothespin upon the head of his penis.
All right, Tonya.
If he couldn't go to the bathroom, he'd be chained to a drain pipe near the toilet until he could force a bowel movement. Often, Dennis was force-fed and made to swallow spicy foods. If he threw up during this cruel treatment, he'd be forced to eat his own vomit. I fucking hate people. I hate people. Lois obsessed about Dennis's weight, claiming he was too big, but according to his medical records at the time of adoption, doctors noted he was the appropriate weight for a child of his age and build. That didn't matter, though. He was frequently starved to rid him of quote-unquote sloppy fat, as Lois called it. She even used the name sloppy fat as a nickname for Dennis. Due to the frequent amount of starvation he endured, Dennis gained only 3 pounds during the entire 2.5-year period, as he aged from 1-year-old to 3.5 years old.
This has to be messing up Robert, too.
Right? I mean, Robert's there. When Dennis was permitted to eat, he would sometimes reject certain foods just as any normal child would do.
Yeah, my kids reject all the food.
Yeah.
Except mac and cheese and ramen noodles.
And chicken nuggets, right? However, when this happened, it pissed Lois off to high hell, and she responded by placing horseradish on the food and then force-feeding it to him. According to reports from family members who would later testify at trial, one told a story of a time when Dennis turned purple from being force-fed a bitter and spicy horseradish, whatever, and then having his oxygen supply cut off as Lois covered his mouth and nose. This treatment, coupled with the exertion as he struggled, made Dennis sick to the point of vomiting. Obviously, this enraged her, and you know what she did. I don't have to repeat it.
You don't have to repeat it.
Other reports claimed Lois would often strike Dennis with her hands, pull and lift him up by the ears, whip him with a belt or a cedar board, and frequently kept him tied to his crib. So as you mentioned, what was Harold doing?
Yeah, where is he?
He was there, and I wondered about it while I was reading this story. Like, did he intervene? But no. The truth was, Harold was intimidated by Lois. He was scared of her. Lois was an extremely disturbed woman who was prone to fly off the handle at the slightest annoyance, and Harold, just like the children, was whipped into submission.
Well, okay, but he's a grown man.
He did nothing to help curb the abuse, but he did note that he personally never mistreated Dennis.
Okay, he just allowed it.
He just allowed it. Certain neighbors and family members knew there were problems with Lois's treatment of Dennis, but they also did nothing to prevent it. They attempted to mind their own business and feared retribution from Lois, who wasn't above threatening them of their own lives, like threatening their lives.
A scary bitch.
Yeah. Lois had quite the reputation amongst those who knew her, which was that she was an intense, angry woman with a very short and volatile temper.
Clearly.
In other words, you didn't want to get in her way when she was on a mission to rage. And whatever the reason was, Dennis's arrival in her home provoked sadistic rages that she would unleash on him. She was literally obsessed with abusing him, and she went out of her way to make sure he knew he was the bad child and Robert was the good child. Then one fateful day, Lois took her abuse a little too far.
Oh boy, here it comes.
Here it comes. On the night of April 10th, 1965, a great flood hit the St. Paul area, with the Mississippi River waters rising to record levels and eventually bursting its banks, causing widespread destruction in the region. Places of businesses and homes were flooding rapidly, and the Jergens home was unfortunately one of them. The water soon poured into the home and just flooded the basement. Lois stood by and watched as the elements started to destroy this home that she worked so hard to make perfect. The very thing that she was the most proud of was being wiped away right in front of her eyes, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. So this sent her into a crazy fit of rage, and as always, it was Dennis who bore the brunt of her anger. The 3-year-old was punched, slapped, and slammed against the walls.
Can you try to make this less sad?
I know. He was throttled, thrown down the stairs into the flooded basement, and then hurled back up again by his arm. Lois was on a rage rampage. In the early morning hours of the following day, April 11th, which was Palm Sunday, Dennis's frail body couldn't take an ounce more of the punishment, and he tragically died. Harold and Lois told authorities pretty much the same story. Dennis had been suffering from a bad cold. The morning before, Saturday, he had slipped on the basement floor near the bathroom, damp from flooding, all of that great stuff, and he struck his head on the tile. At 9 a.m. Sunday morning, Lois went into Dennis's bedroom only to find him gasping for breath and gurgling. They said they immediately dialed the doctor and the police. However, by the time they called, it was 9:30 and the police got there at 10. Dennis had already passed. Once brought to the morgue, Dennis was undressed and stripped of a pair of pajamas, an undershirt, rubber pants, and 2 diapers. I'm thinking they're the cloth diapers because he's got those rubber pants on. The arm and facial bruises continued across virtually all of Dennis's body, radiating in every direction, varying from the size of a dime to a $50. During the autopsy, the pathologist counted from 50 to 100 bruises running the length of Dennis's body. The exact number was hard to judge because so many of them overlapped. They were varied in colors, so some were fresh, some were black and blue, yellow,
right.
The various stages of bruising. They covered his legs, arms, hands, the front and back of his head, his shoulders, his buttocks, the small of his back, the middle of his back, everywhere.
Right.
I don't think there was a spot on this poor baby that didn't have a bruise. There was also a large swollen abrasion on his forehead. There was a bluish mark on the right side of his head that started at the temple and extended to behind his right ear. There was also a deep ulcerous lesion on the base of his penis and dark bruises on the tip, which looked a lot like a human bite.
Stop.
I know, I'm sorry. The coroner noted in his report that Dennis had almost 0 subcutaneous fat, which put him at the level of a person who had died of starvation. Subcutaneous fat is the kind of fat that we call baby fat. The kind you can pinch.
I got a little of that.
I got a lot of that. It lies just below the first 2 layers of your skin. None of this, however, was what killed Dennis. During the internal autopsy, a 1/4-inch perforation in the boy's small bowel was found. The hole had allowed 1/5 of a quart of infectious fecal matter to flow into his abdominal cavity. It was judged that the perforation had occurred 1 to 2 days before his death. During that time, the abdominal cavity's surface tissue, normally shiny, had turned dull, and the pus-filled matter had solidified.
Oh, come on, man.
Forming adhesions, matting together pieces of the bowel, which were classic symptoms of peritonitis, which is a redness and swelling inflammation of the lining of your belly or abdomen. Dennis most likely had died after an extended period of agonizing pain, and needlessly, as this could have been treated. At the time, it wasn't known specifically what caused the fatal blow, though the injury was later found to have been, beyond a reasonable doubt, inflicted by Lois, and the evidence of her constant physical abuse. While there was some form of an investigation, it wasn't much. The case definitely didn't receive the attention it so rightfully deserved. When it came down to it, this was a different time. Society and law enforcement of the mid-60s didn't accept the concept that a child in a middle-class home could be the target of abuse.
Such abuse.
It was simply something that just didn't happen. That being said, it would have been difficult at the time to prove that Lois had committed murder. I know. It's crazy.
So ridiculous.
In spite of extensive physical evidence pointing towards severe abuse, the medical examiner didn't classify the death under any of the standard classifications of accident, suicide, or murder. He simply marked it deferred.
Okay. Deferred.
That's like, I don't want to say. That's what that says to me.
We'll get to it later.
Yeah, we'll tell you later. There was also a great deal of suspicion surrounding Jerome Zerwis, who was the brother of Lois Jergens. He was a police lieutenant in the town of White Bear Lake. Actually, he was the number 2 on this case.
Oh, so he investigated it.
There was a common belief among witnesses, neighbors, and the investigators who eventually reopened the case that Jerome interfered with the investigation and destroyed incriminating evidence. Whether this was true or not, Lois managed to escape the brunt of any criminal charges.
Unbelievable.
I know. Instead, she would be faced with the authorities' decision to remove Robert from her care.
Oh, that is punishment for her.
Yeah, and he was placed in the custody of his paternal grandmother. As you just said, it drove her nuts. Robert would remain out of her grasp for 5 long years. During this time, the Jergens spent a small fortune trying to regain custody through the courts. When that failed, Lois started spewing threats of arson. Whether these threats were held in any real weight isn't completely certain.
To the paternal grandparents? Is that who she threatening arson to?
Yeah. And one thing that did happen, though, Robert's grandmother would end up dying in a house fire in 1970 while Robert was in the hospital recovering from a bout of pneumonia. So, coincidence?
Weird. Coincidence?
Very weird.
I think not.
For this reason, Robert, who is now 10, was returned to the monster's lair. I believe the only reason this was allowed to happen was because the Jergens had hired a new lawyer who happened to be good friends with the judge who presided over the juvenile court custody hearing. Not to mention, the couple had finally agreed to be examined by a county-appointed psychiatrist. A Ramsey County social worker, her name was Marion Dinah Nord, later told police she had strongly opposed Robert's return, feeling certain Dennis had been killed. But she said she had been discouraged by her supervisors and the prosecutor from probing into the past. She told police she was left with the impression that she wasn't to get involved in why Robert was taken in the first place. She was only to study the question of whether it was okay to return him now.
Really?
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 Because that sounds like a great idea. Come on.
This is so ridiculous.
I know. In the end, the doctors who checked out Lois both decided she was okay. The prosecutor and the welfare department were no longer opposed to Robert's return. 2 years later, in 1972, Robert was joined by 4 more school-aged children, 3 brothers and a sister from Kentucky. They joined the home.
Are you kidding me?
No.
You're what?
No.
The fuck?
I know. The state of Kentucky wanted to get these 4 children off of welfare and keep them together and place them in a Catholic home. The Jergens' annual salary was now $16,000 a year. I think that's really good money for 1972. So they hired a lawyer to press their case. Once more, some of the social workers objected to the adoption, but they were again shut down by their superiors. Lois had gotten a glowing reference from her pastor, Father Bernard Reiser, and that seemed to be all she needed to set things in motion. So the children were delivered to their new home and introduced to their new evil stepmother. Well, not quite a stepmother, but it sounded good.
Yeah, adopted mom.
Adopted mom. By this point, Lois's rage and mania had gone beyond her ability to maintain an appearance of normalcy, and people were talking. It didn't take long for them to relocate to rural Stillwater, Minnesota, possibly in an effort to escape the gossip of their former neighborhood where Dennis was killed. Despite this, Lois pretty much picked up where she left off with Dennis, and she began doling out savage beatings on the regular. Moreover, she had not lost her active imagination when it came to dreaming up the cruelest of punishments. One time, she grabbed one of the boys by his ears and slammed his forehead into a nail protruding from the wall.
Stop it. Stop it.
I know. Another time, one of the kids was made to stand barefoot in the snow. On another occasion, and this is just fucked up. I don't even want to say it.
Because the rest wasn't.
Yeah. Lois rubbed a used sanitary napkin in one of the children's faces.
Oh, man.
Like, really? Like, I can't.
Wow.
Like, disgusting. Like, why would she do that? Lois would wake them in the middle of the night to inspect their rooms, beating them if she found dust or hangers crossed in the closet.
Reminds me of Mommy Dearest.
I was just going to say that. It reminded me a little bit of Mommy Dearest. Lois's bedroom door squeaked loudly when she opened it, and when they heard that noise, the children couldn't help but be consumed by fear. Coming home from school on the bus, they could see the Jergens' driveway from a distance, like from the top of a hill. And if Lois's gold Buick Skylark was parked there, they would just be terrified to go home. And before I tell you more, we're going to take a break. Sometimes Lois would order Harold to beat the children.
I thought he didn't do that.
Well, he didn't. He would take them into the basement and tell them to cry loudly while he slapped his own leg. During this period, Lois was once again placed in a psychiatric facility. Eventually, the 4 children couldn't take it any longer because Robert never got any of this abuse.
Still didn't get any.
Yeah, he still didn't get any. They couldn't take it any longer and they decided to run away. And they took Robert with them. They escaped the home and ended up getting help from concerned neighbors who then got the police involved. Since the 4 Kentucky children were older, they were able to vividly recount to authorities the daily abuse that they suffered from at the hands of their foster mother.
I thought she adopted them.
No, she didn't adopt them.
Oh, okay.
They told their sad tale about their impossible living situation, coupled with their own version of a dictator who ran it. Their former foster mother in Kentucky visited them after they fled the Jergens' home, and she was horrified. The children she had known as loving, affectionate, and happy were now distrustful and disoriented. One of the boys later would spend hours on a psychiatrist's couch trying to block out the pain. Afterward, the decision was quickly made by authorities to remove the children from Kentucky, but Robert was left to stay with Lois and Harold.
Oh.
Additionally,
Because that makes sense.
I know. Additionally, Lois and Harold were to never again be allowed to adopt or even foster children. Lois, of course, lost her goddamn mind and raged against this, too.
Pretty sure that happened a while ago.
Yeah. She threatened to take the matters to court, but Harold wisely persuaded her against this course of action. He didn't want to attract any more unnecessary attention. Where would it lead, right? So at this point, Lois had pretty much gotten off scot-free with not only countless acts of cruelty against children, but also the horrendous murder of poor 3-year-old Dennis. Lucky for us, karma was about to catch up with Lois.
Karma's a bitch.
Yep. And
doesn't forgive.
It doesn't forgive, and there was a little bit of justice served. Do you remember I told you about Dennis's birth mom, Jerry?
Yes.
Well, at this point in the story, it's now the early 1980s, and Jerry wasn't a clueless teenager anymore, but a grown woman in her late 30s who had since married Dennis's biological father and had 4 more children by him.
Aw, that is sweet.
I know. But of course, she never forgot about her firstborn. She assumed he would be a young adult by now, and she wondered if he might like to get to know her and his younger siblings. So Jerry began making inquiries. She had called the Ramsey County Welfare Department trying to trace the whereabouts of her son. 6 weeks later, they had responded by letter, and that was how Jerry would make the heartbreaking discovery that Dennis had passed.
Oh, man.
I know. All it said was, quote, "Sorry to inform you that Dennis Craig died April 11th, 1965 of peritonitis. Sincerely." And it came from that county. It came as a shock to her. After all, he was only 3. So
Right.
peritonitis.
Right.
Jerry began making calls and doing a ton of research on Dennis and what could have possibly happened to her precious baby boy. She just felt in her bones that something awful happened to him and she needed to know. From the yellowing newspaper notice of his death that she found during her search, she learned that the boy's body bore multiple injuries and bruises. From the death certificate, she learned that while Dennis had died of peritonitis due to a ruptured bowel, the coroner had never ruled whether the death was an accident, homicide, or natural causes. They just buried him, and that was it. Jerry had somehow managed to get a telephone number for Lois Jergens, so she called her.
Oh, shit.
Right? While they were talking, Lois acted taken aback at the fact that no one ever informed Jerry of the boy's death. She appeared very compassionate as she told tales of happy, healthy, cute Dennis. Lois was kind, polite, and even promised to send Jerry some mementos of Dennis's. However, the keepsakes never arrived, and when Jerry made a follow-up call to the Jergens residence, she discovered that Lois had since switched to an unlisted phone number. Obviously, this immediately perked her suspicion.
Right.
You know, I'd be like, that seems a little weird. So Jerry took it upon herself and did her due diligence. With Dennis's death certificate still classified as deferred, the case was technically still open. This factor, grouped together with the lack of a statute of limitations for a murder charge, she pretty much paved the way toward the prosecution of Lois. Right then, she decided she was going to take up this matter with the White Bear Lake Police Department. She was convinced that her son had been beaten to death and demanded the case be reopened. She asked to see the police report, which read as follows. Quote, Dennis was lying on his back in the crib with his arms tautly stretched alongside his body, the hands and forearms reaching upward, lifted, stiff, 8 inches off the mattress. Bed covers pulled up.
Rigor mortis.
Yeah. Bed covers pulled up to below his armpits obscured the lower part of Dennis's body, but a good number of black and blue spots could still be seen all over the boy's face, head, and arms. There were at least a dozen bruises on the face alone, which ranged in size and shades of color. A big, harsh abrasion covered the center of his forehead. Dennis's nose was blood red and peeling, so red it looked like if you wiped it once, the skin would pull away. It just didn't make sense to Jerry. There were also so many mishaps throughout the case as a whole. For starters, there were pieces of the case file that had gone missing, such as crime scene photos.
That's what you were saying about the brother of Lois.
Witness testimonies were missing. And there were reports of people coming forward to give their statement and then being threatened later if they didn't recant their words.
Oh, man.
Also, authority figures that had originally witnessed something amplified would later recount what they saw as nothing out of the ordinary. It was like, oh no, it wasn't that big of a deal.
Okay.
There were a lot of pieces of the case that seemed to be hush-hushed or swiped under the rug without a second glance. No one wanted to get their hands dirty with something we as a society still didn't fully understand and definitely were not the least bit educated on. Children from middle-class homes were just not routinely killed by their parents or by those who were supposed to have loved them the most. Jerry contacted the medical examiner's office in Ramsey County to see if she could get more information. A pathologist by the name of Dr. Michael B. McGee met Jerry there. Dr. McGee found the autopsy report, and inside the file were pictures of Dennis as he appeared all those years ago. And Dr. McGee wasn't prepared for what he saw. He said, quote, that little boy laying on an autopsy table completely nude, and he's just covered with bruises. His face is covered in them. He has a large bruise on his forehead region. His abdomen is distended. I said, well, this is a homicide. And, we need to find out what happened. After seeing the pictures, it was decided that in order to find out what happened, Dennis would have to be exhumed. I know this poor baby. The body of Dennis Jergens was dressed in a blue outfit with a long-sleeved white shirt, and shockingly, his body was very well preserved, even though Dennis had been buried more than 20 years at that point. Dr. McGee wanted to find out his exact cause of death, and he worked hard until he found it. He didn't give up. And that's when he found out what killed him. And when he did, he was positive that it wasn't an accident, that he didn't pass away from an accident.
Did she do something rectally to him?
No.
Oh.
Thank God, right? It was the peritonitis.
That's why I thought it was something
I know, this poor
rectal.
kid. He said that children do fall down and they get injured and they do hurt themselves, but the way that he was injured, there was no way it could be an accident. The force of his injuries just couldn't have happened just by him slipping and falling. So when Jerry found this out, she went to the local media with this information, and she wasn't going to stop until somebody really listened to her. On Sunday, October 12th, the St. Paul Pioneer Press ran a story on the investigation, praising Jerry for her tenacity and writing about the tragedy of her personal loss. As luck would have it, one of those who read the story was none other than Robert.
Robert.
Yeah, who as a 5-year-old had been a witness to the murder. Now a 27-year-old adult and police officer.
Oh, he's a police officer.
Robert decided it was time to come forward and tell what he knew. At his mother's trial, Robert recounted the events of that evening, including Lois's extensive beating of Dennis and his being thrown down the stairs by her. He said, quote, Dennis used to cry, try to get away. Later on, Dennis didn't do as much crying, and he didn't do any running away. I would recall that he more or less submitted and would just kind of whimper and not get into that heavy crying.
He gave up.
I don't know exactly the reason why, but I cherished my mother. I did everything she said. I ate my food, I picked up my toys, I kept neat, and Dennis didn't. And as a result, Dennis received more traumatic reprimands. End quote. In the days preceding Dennis's death, he remembered Lois in the basement, dunking Dennis's head in a laundry tub full of water.
Oh.
She was holding his head there until Dennis was gasping and crying, trying to breathe. Riding his tricycle in the basement soon after that, Robert remembered hearing several loud thuds, then seeing Dennis rolling very fast and landing hard at the base of the stairs on his stomach. Then his mother came running down the stairs after him, hollering at Dennis, picking him up, shaking him, and hitting him. As for the night Dennis died, Robert remembered it well. He said it was storming out, thundering and lightning. Remember the flood?
Yeah.
He was afraid to go to bed, but he did finally. The next thing he heard were screams coming from Dennis's room the following morning. He said, quote, I remember waking up hearing loud screams. I went to Dennis's bedroom. I saw Lois picking Dennis up out of his crib. She kept yelling his name, Dennis, Dennis, Dennis. His arms were limp like a dish towel, and he was just swaggering, his arms and his legs. Something was wrong, and his head was moving back and forth, uncontrollable. End quote. During the trial, when asked if he thought his mother was responsible for Dennis's death, Robert said yes. Dr. McGee testified also at the trial, and he went into detail about how hard he would have had to have fallen for it to injure him like it did. And I'm not going to describe it any further.
Thank you.
You're welcome. In 1987, Lois was convicted of third-degree murder of Dennis.
Third degree.
I know. And she was sentenced to a maximum of 25 years in prison.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
Stop.
She would serve only 8 years of her sentence before she was released on good behavior and paroled in 1995.
I'm just happy she got some time, man.
She returned to Stillwater, Minnesota, where she lived with her husband, Harold, until his death.
Harold.
Harold, you son of a bitch. Seriously? And Harold died in 2000. At that time, Lois was initially suspected of poisoning him.
Oh.
However, he was in failing health, and his autopsy results didn't indicate poisoning, so there was really
I wouldn't
no
be
inquiry.
surprised.
I wouldn't either. There was also talk years earlier of her having started the fire at her in-laws home, remember? Which killed her mother-in-law. And she really never got along with her mother-in-law, so people were like, it would make sense. Lois would live for another 13 years.
Jeez.
She died on May 7th, 2013 at the age of 87.
Wow.
Until the end, she insisted she was innocent.
Of course.
Of all the accusations against her.
I was a great mom.
I was a great mom. I loved him.
All those kids are just lying.
Yeah, everybody's lying. During the years to follow, a much-needed evolution unfolded in this country.
Yeah.
The idea of child abuse.
Yeah.
It was finally exposed, and people do believe it now, and it can happen to anybody. It wasn't until 1975 that Minnesota adopted legislation regarding the reporting and maltreatment of minors. In 1971, the term battered-child syndrome made its first appearance in a case that reached the Minnesota State Supreme Court. The investigation, trial, and conviction are considered landmarks in the history of child abuse law.
I didn't know that.
That concerning Lois. And with that that's the end of my horrific story. Poor little Dennis.
Thanks for really putting me in a bad fucking mood.
I'm so sorry. I know this was just, why haven't I heard of this woman? But I'm kind of glad I didn't know about her. But
You know what we should do to make it better? Review.
The reviewer?
Yes.
I got one.
That is necessary at this point.
Okay, Talia.
Are you going to read it to me?
I'm going to read it to
All
you.
right.
Do you want to hear the bad review or the good review first?
I don't care.
Okay. Then I'm going to start with the bad review.
Oh, great. Just kick me when I'm down.
So we received an email just yesterday from Kim, and this is what Kim had to say.
Okay.
Ladies, I used to really like your podcast, but had to stop. You don't need to go into all the gory details to get the story across. The constant, oh my God, from Tonya is the most annoying thing ever.
Can you say that for me?
Oh my God.
I think that's beautiful.
Oh my God. I don't know.
She can fuck off.
All that comes across as a joke with no respect to the victims.
Is that it?
And that's it.
Well, I'm going to give her a 1 motherfucking star because I love it when you say, oh my God. What should you say?
What should I say? And my reactions are genuine.
Yeah.
So,
you know what? She can fuck off.
Yeah, she can fuck off and good riddance.
And how did you like us before, but not like us now? Because you've been saying, oh my God.
I know, since day one.
And we've been going into the gory details since day one.
Exactly. I don't understand her email. Yeah. So I have not responded, but I plan to. I just haven't decided what
we
I'm
can
gonna
just
say.
respond this way.
Yeah, that's true.
With fuck off. You get a 1 star.
I wanted to be like, okay, well then go listen to your
Crime Junkie.
G-rated crime. Go for it. I'm sorry you don't appreciate
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
But that's what bothers her, not like, what the fuck?
Yeah, that doesn't, exactly.
What the fuck is this shit? Doesn't bother her, but the oh my God.
So in the future, I'm going to come up with some different reactions.
Okay.
And you're going to laugh every single fucking time because they're going to be stupid.
She gets a 1 star. What do you think?
1 star.
1 star for Kim. Thank you, Kim, for that input. We really appreciate it. Go fuck yourself.
Go fuck yourself.
Sorry.
Oh, Talia, I love you so much. Yeah, go fuck yourself.
Whoa, where did that come from?
Okay, so this is the good review. And it kind of is like similar topics. That's why I'm going to laugh, right?
Okay.
So this person is Randy Tex, and they just left this review this past Tuesday. It's a 5-star review.
Oh, that was nice of them.
Love these ladies. One of my favorite podcasts. They keep it real and allow their own disgust for the criminal of the week. Normally, I would rather hear the story without slant by the host, but the timing of reactions is real and doesn't feel scripted. Keep up the great work.
That's because it's not scripted.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely not scripted.
Definitely not scripted.
Yeah, never scripted.
Nope. So he gets 5 stars.
Yeah. That person gets 5 stars.
You.
And it's just funny because like one person likes it, one person doesn't. You can't make everybody happy.
No, you can barely make anybody happy.
That's why there's just tons of other podcasts you can listen to. If you don't like it,
yeah, you can go
listen to those.
Fuck off.
But thank you for the nice one.
Randy, that was very, very nice of you.
Very nice of you.
It is
thank you.
Not scripted like some of the podcasts I may have just mentioned 2 minutes ago.
Exactly. So if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe or follow button on whatever app you're listening to us on. It really helps us out. Thank you for tuning in this week. If you love us so much that you want extra episodes and you haven't subscribed to Patreon or through our Apple channel,
you should.
You should, because there's just as many Patreon episodes as there are weekly episodes.
Yeah, public.
So check them out. Sometimes more because there's minis.
Yeah.
So there's more.
Yeah. and you can get our public episodes ad-free and early. It's released early. Fridays.
Yep, Fridays instead of Monday. You can find out information about that on our website, crimesandconsequences.com, or go to patreon.com/TNTcrimes.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm going to start saying it like that. Oh my
God.
Oh my God.
That's what you got to do. You got to change it up a little bit.
Then it's going to sound ridiculous.
Oh my God.
You're going to laugh, and we're going to be laughing about child abuse.
No, that's not funny.
No, it's not funny.
No, it's not.
And my oh my gods are not funny.
No.
I'm like shocked, genuinely shocked. I told you I'm going to come up with some new ones.
All right, well, make a list.
So everybody pay attention. Next time Talia tells a story.
Yes, I can't wait. I can't wait to see your list.
Be like, ay caramba. I don't know.
What?
I don't know.
What?
I don't know. Egads. I don't know, right?
What is that? Is that a word?
Yes, it's a word.
Is it English?
Yeah.
Egads?
Ay caramba is not English, but
I understand that. I'm not stupid.
I know. I'm just
But what is
teasing
egads?
you. I don't know. Egads. I know. It sounds
Where's
ridiculous,
that from?
right?
Canada? That sounds like something Canadians would say.
On that note, everyone.
Don't kill each other.
Bye.
Bye.